Good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast for Tommy Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Tuesday, November 12th, 2019. Here are our top stories. Could artificial intelligence put truckers' jobs at risk? And consumers get more control over their data? It's Tech Tuesday, and that means a hard look at the intersection of technology and finance. And joining me to discuss these topics and a lot more, Daniel Klein. He's a senior technology and consumer products reporter with The Motley Fool. Welcome to the program.
Oh, hey there, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know you're battling a little bit of a cold, so thank you very much for coming on the program. We love having Tech Tuesday. So I know we're talking a little bit about artificial intelligence. Is that going to put truckers out of work?
So artificial intelligence, or AI, is sort of the big boogeyman for everyone. It's coming to take your job. The example I'll give in my field is there are actually computer-generated artificial intelligence earning report stories, meaning that they've taught a robot how to take data that's pretty well formatted and turn it into a very boring story. So yes, in theory, trucking can be automated. But the reality is right now, we don't need pilots to fly planes, yet we still have pilots. And the reason for that is the standard for automated trucking is 0 accidents ever. If there is one accident, they will take every truck off the road. So even if you say, and I'm making this number up, for every 1,000 trips, there's 10 accidents for traditional truckers, and using AI and not having drivers would cut that down to 1, it still won't happen. So you're going to see select use of this, maybe on some highways and some very predictable routes, maybe even sort of with secondary roadways, like in Connecticut, they had some specific lanes built just for buses. You might see that type of thing, but you're not going to see sort of a widespread, let's get rid of truckers, because people are afraid of this. It's just like the automated driving in cars. It's a thing, but it's not going to be a thing to the extent you think it is anytime soon.
Yeah, there are a litany of articles and reports on TV about AI, and I tend to agree. I don't think it's going to be like the Terminator or Back to the Future or one of those things. I still think we have a long way to go in terms of the programming. Daniel, what I was thinking about was some of the back office logistical work that maybe could be assisted by AI. So, programmatically scheduling or doing the things to get logistical things in accounting. I mean, those are possible areas that could be automated, and you would have obviously less impact to the general public.
So you're going to see automation everywhere. If you go into the back of a Walmart, right now, we talked about this before, there's tons of people physically picking orders to deliver to local customers. Well, a lot of that order picking process is going to get automated. A lot of the inventory process is going to get automated. And some of that is we have a shortage of workers for menial jobs. So right now, there's about 6 million job openings and largely nobody to fill those openings. So we're at the point where companies sort of financially are going to need to take the risk and spend the money to automate some of their back-end functionality. You're going to see it at Walmart, Target, the big players first, but I've been to trade shows where there's off-the-shelf solutions for any grocery store to automate, picking orders for delivery. You still need some people, but you don't need as many. Scheduling, all sorts of things that can be computer assisted are going to be. And is that going to change jobs? Absolutely. Is it going to eliminate jobs? Sure. But it's also going to create jobs and not just robot polisher.
Yeah, I like that, robot polisher. Hey, Dan, you just came back from the Money 2020 conference. You alluded to other conferences that you've been going to and you will go to later this month. How far are we along in artificial intelligence? And I bring up, we hear a lot about stuff. We hear it in articles. We hear it on the news reports. But we hear about IBM Blue, right? The chess playing computer that can beat, the world's greatest chess player. But how far is the programming and the technology? How far along are we?
Well, it's hard to know because in a controlled setting, AI can do lots of things, but reality is not a controlled setting. So you might program your robot truck to do everything perfectly, but not account for the weather or an oil spill or who knows what might go wrong. And I think that's true of AI across the board. Can you program a perfect chess player? Yes, because all the variables are known. But there are other things like, can an AI make a better decision than you and I on a individual person's retirement? It can help, it can run scenarios, it can give us best cases, it can give us all sorts of data. But ultimately, you and I are going to know that person better. Not that either one of us is specifically doing retirement planning for anyone, but we're going to know the situation and help them make those decisions. So, you know, 10 years ago, if you said to me, you are always going to carry around a mini computer and that's going to be a major part of how you do things, I probably would have laughed at you. And the reality is, the amount of time I'm not sleeping where there's not a phone in my hand is pretty limited.
Yeah, those are very powerful computers, much powerful than the Apple IIs that I remember, and you probably remember when we were growing up as kids. Dan, you alluded to this in your remarks just moments ago about, you kind of alluded to robo-advisors, and they do use some level of algorithm, but I think, based on our conversations on the network and on the podcast, I mean, it's still that world where you can have the best algorithms, but you still potentially need a person to work with you to help work through some of these issues. We're all individuals, we're all unique, we all have our own challenges, right? So there's the benefit there of having both work together.
So you could use a mortgage calculator or one of the estimators on your credit card website that tells you, if you do this, where will your credit card score go? Those are great for broad strokes. Okay, my portfolio should be a little bit different. And then you talk to a person about how to make that happen in ways that you're comfortable. A robo-advisor can tell you sort of the broad stroke of where to go, but it doesn't know that maybe you only want to invest in environmentally friendly companies. Maybe you only want to invest in companies that harm the environment. Whatever it is, a human can sort of make those last connections for you.
Yeah, Dan, last question. We have the iPhone, the Android phones that can do facial recognition. How much can a computer read your tendencies by looking at you? I mean, we're surveilled or looked at through many cameras on the street, right? I mean, that's how the police a lot of times maintain law and order in big cities like New York and Boston, et cetera. But how far along is the AI technology with looking at an individual and trying to figure out the tendencies that you may have based on your body language alone?
So I don't think we're in Minority Report yet, where they can predict the murder. But I do think we're getting to the point where, with big ticket terrorism, with a mix of electronic surveillance and human surveillance, where we can start to pick up patterns and identify big things before they happen. We're not stopping you from robbing a grocery store that way, but we might be stopping international terrorist incidents. We might get to the point where we can identify when a person walks into a mall or other high traffic area with very ill intent. Ability to do it and the public accepting us doing that is going to mean keeping it on a very big level. Nobody likes the automated traffic cam where you don't feel like you got pulled over, but you barely went through a red light and a ticket gets mailed to you 3 weeks later. So I think we're going to have to be a little hesitant about enacting things that make the world a little bit too big brother.
Yeah, very important points. And just for the record, I will not be robbing any grocery stores. He was meaning you in a very gentle turn. Let's stick around. We're going to talk to Dan about privacy, some additional thoughts on privacy. So stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. Welcome back. We're talking to Dan Klein, Senior Technology and Consumer Products Reporter with the Motley Fool. It's Tech Tuesday. Dan, thanks so much for sticking around. I know you're challenged by a cold this week.
Yeah, a little bit under the weather, but I'm getting through, and I have another 5 days at home before I get in a plane, so not so bad.
No, that doesn't sound bad at all until you had the recirculated air. Hope you feel better. Let's talk about, there's been some developments this week about consumers actually getting more control of their data from banking and financial apps. Why don't you weigh in on this?
Yeah, so it's more about banks giving you the ability to take control. And some of the biggest banks, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, you're allowed to connect your bank account to certain other apps that might help you monitor your finances. And when it does that, what it does is it scrapes your data, it gets all your info. Now, the problem is, what's it doing with that info? Is it selling it? Is it using it just for you? So now, and it's not easy to find, some of the bigger banks are allowing you to go in and make choices as to what you share. So maybe you're willing to share your account balances, but you're not willing to share what your paycheck is, right, or what your mortgage payment is. And so really, anytime you connect your bank account to anything, you should think long and hard about who has this data, because your whole life is right there.
Yeah, I think that's a smart point. I mean, it does take action on the part of the consumer. And I think you're referencing, 10 years ago or 7 years ago when Mint.com and Personal Capital and other third-party calculators and tools were developed, people really didn't think much about privacy, just like they didn't think about oversharing on Facebook or LinkedIn and some of the other platforms, right? And I think people now have heard about these things. They've heard about some of the sales and selling of data and whatnot. And so this is just another tool that you can use, another switch that you can flip as a consumer with these banks to prevent your data falling into bad hands.
Sharing your data can be very beneficial to you. When I was at Money 2020, I met with a guy named Varun Krishna. He's the head of product for Intuit. And Intuit, because of what the company does with bookkeeping and records and tax refunds and all the other things, knows an awful lot about you. And if you're willing to answer some questions about what your goals are, Intuit can give you suggestions to meet those goals and also offers that help you meet those goals. So maybe they're coming back to you and saying, hey, Jeff, we see you want to retire in 5 years. Here's a bonus to your retirement account that if you sign up for this, here's a way you consolidate your credit card debt to pay it off faster. So instead of just getting this sort of like broad, here are some deals we made for all our customers, it's no, you said you want to buy a house in a year. Here's a way you can fix your credit in that period. Here's a mortgage company you can start talking to now to get the loan you need when you need it.
It's really good point, Stan. How intrusive is it with companies with data? Are all companies? I mean, we've heard in the press about, for example, Facebook selling consumer data. But is that really a prevalent thing for banks and other financial institutions? Are there a lot of them selling anecdotally? Because I don't think you have all the stats.
It depends on the bank. Some banks will come to you and say, we do not sell your data. Other banks will only sell aggregate data. So maybe you can buy a list of people with $75,000 or more in savings and no obvious credit card debt. But you can't buy specifically your name, and you're not seeing that list. But of course, if you respond to that offer, they know what offer it is and they're getting the data. So it's one of those questions you should research. When you're picking a bank, when you're looking at an app, dig into exactly what they're going to get and what rights they have to use it. You don't want to be allowing someone, even if it's just annoying. I know one of the things I fell for is I needed insurance a few years ago. And I went online, home insurance, and I filled out one of those, like, we'll get you 10 quotes.
Yeah.
Well, not only did they get me 10 quotes, they got me 10 phone calls a day for like the next 10 months and still like 3 phone calls a month. And now we're 3 years later. Like it's just an endless loop. So you really need to be careful. On the other hand, you could look at like a lending tree where you put in your info and get multiple mortgage offers, and those are just sitting in a folder and you can pick which one you want. You don't get a bunch of calls. So you want to look at the reputation of these companies and sometimes what they openly say, like, we do not share your information, or here's what we share.
No, I think that's really good points and things that we really didn't consider as consumers when we were going online. I mean, a lot of people did not think about, they thought it was a good service to be able to get multiple rates from an insurance company or from a third party. And it sounded good on paper, but you have to ask yourself, how is this organization making money, right? Because if they're not selling a product or they're selling a service, are you paying for it? I'm also very leery of when people say it's free. It's free to an extent, right? But you've got to put in certain data that probably they can use and sell to somebody else.
Yeah, and you've got to be very careful because I'm sure there are some insurance aggregators that are great companies that will find you 3 good offers. In the case of the one I used, I literally just got put on every company's list. They didn't have my information. So even if I wanted to use them, I had to go through the process over and over and over again. I had a similar experience with car insurance, but again, it was more controlled. I got 3 offers. I got to select which ones I wanted to talk to. It was still frustrating in that when I finally spoke to the person, they didn't have all my data, all the stupid forms I had to fill out. But we ended up getting some quotes, deciding they weren't better than where we were and not moving. So we're not saying don't use this type of service or don't ever share your data. It just be selective and really look at what they're going to do with it. And you might even consider having like a different phone number or email address that you attach when you do this kind of thing.
Yeah, and you shouldn't assume, Dan, that Apple, Google, and their stores are doing the scrutiny as well. I mean, they're doing some of it, but how can you police millions of apps, whether they're financial, non-financial apps, right?
Yeah, and there's different rules. Like even with Facebook, when you connect an app to Facebook or log in through something else, it tells you what data that can see. And if you're not comfortable with the data they can see, you can log in a different way. This is something where we've talked about this so many times. If it's a giant company, chances are they're not doing anything too terrible. I know Wells Fargo has been an exception to that at points, but for the most part, but if it's an app you've never heard of, now it might be great. It might be something absolutely huge like Acorns that a lot of people still haven't heard of. That's a really great app that has a lot of data and doesn't do anything nefarious with it. But do your homework. Talk to other people that have it. You can Google these things and see if there's a lot of complaints. You can go on Twitter, find their Twitter handle, and just at whatever it is, what do you do with the data you have? Do you share it? And ask them the question. And that's a great way to check in a company. If a company doesn't respond to you within that business day, they're probably not a very good company.
Yeah. Well, Dan, always great to get your insight on these very important issues. I think people out there are really wrestling with this. Thanks so much for joining us on Tech Tuesday, and we'll talk to you later this week on the podcast.
Thank you.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it very helpful. Hey, have a financial topic or someone of interest that you think we should interview? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the news in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, healthcare, and so much more, check out today's edition of The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
But if you're tired of the same